Right in the city. It's literally, take 94 and take that turn, it's like before you make the turn. I thought we'd see the lake along there. You don't see the lake at all. His girlfriend's name was Abby. Summer home. And I guess they're on the Green Bay side, so it's, you don't go swimming. They live in like western Chicago.
But she said they're not selling unless they get an energy.
So she lived with mom in high school.
I mean, they're still doing what they
Needs to happen. It's there.
they're in the next I feel like
He misses us, but not that much. He's decided to go to civil engineering.
it's not so fast enough for them.
My mom was like, he's a civil engineer,
So they really need it. But I don't also know later.
What's it? Well, mine was a mechanical. I'm civil or very. Obviously, Dad was
Good morning, and I welcome you today as we gather to remember and to give thanks for the life of Don Craighead. I'm Pastor Bill Eves from White Bear Lake United Methodist Church, and presiding today along with Reverend Greg Renstrom, a longtime family friend. And this is John Koziel providing music for us today also. As we come together today, may God grant us grace, that in pain we may find comfort, and in sorrow, hope, and in death, resurrection. I invite you to join me in a moment of prayer. Oh God, our Creator, still creating us, God who laughs with us and who weeps with us, God who walks with us each step of the way, carrying us when our strength fails. We gather today in the face of death, with hearts cracked open from love and from loss. We ask that you would move in and around us today as we gather to remember and say goodbye to Don. Be the shoulder we can cry on, the arm we can lean on. Help us to see through the veil of tears that there is hope for life continuing. And gracious God, as mysterious and wondrous as you are also a compassionate God, as tender as a mother with a newborn child, as protective as a father's warm embrace. We give thanks for all that Don brought to the lives of those around him. And as we say our goodbyes, remind us that we are not alone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Before the readings of Scripture, I'm honored to offer a word of tribute to Don. From the 42nd Psalm, these things I remember as I pour out my soul. These things I remember as I pour out my soul. The cutting word in that magnificent phrase from the 42nd Psalm is the word remember. These things I remember. And that one word summarizes the reason why we are here today. To remember. To call to mind and bring to mind and hold in our hearts and minds and souls the life of someone we all love deeply, Don Craighead. But when we remember, what are the things that we carry in our hearts and minds from his life? What are the qualities and characteristics, the abilities and achievements that so governed our fond remembrance of him? Well, I would imagine that 9 times out of 10, people would instinctively think of his vision and visionary leadership, his ingenuity and creativity and effectiveness in so many areas of life. But 99% of the time, 99 times out of 100, people would also remember his kindness and goodness, his decency and integrity and generosity, a life straight from the Beatitudes. Now, my memories and remembrances of Don might follow along slightly different lines. For me, Don was a person who had an exceptional gift for friendship. He had an exceptional gift for being a friend to other people. I was privileged to know Don in the 1960s. I was also privileged to know Sandy and her sister Susan in the 1950s. Of all of those years, friendship was pivotal. In the 1970s, probably the wisest person I've ever met, who knew more about the pastoral ministry than anybody else I've ever known, took me aside. I was just starting in pastoral ministry, was a young minister. She took me aside and said, there are two things I want you to remember, Greg. First, tend your friendships. Tend your friendships. And second, if in doubt, be there. If there's an emergency in a family, in the congregations that you serve, you don't have to know what you're going to say, you don't have to know what you're going to do. Just show up and lend the strength of your personal presence. Well, she and Don must have known each other, because Don tended his friendships. And if in doubt, Don was always there, supported, and supported, and support. This friendship has the two great features of every great friendship. Probably more than two, but at least two. Affirmation and encouragement. Encouragement and affirmation. This family mentioned on Monday, I never quite thought of it this way, but it was true, that they couldn't remember a single time that Don said a negative word about anybody. Instead, it was affirmation and encouragement, and affirmation. He just had this gift for showing people how much they were loved and cared about deeply. I can't remember a time when he tried to shake me up. I can't count the times that he offered a word of affirmation and encouragement, and affirmation. So where did that come from? What gave him that sense of being a friend? Well, partly, I'm sure it had to do with inheritance. I never knew his mother or his father, but I did know his mother-in-law and his father-in-law, and their influence on him was immense, and I assume that he inherited from his family much of the abilities that he found to be a friend. Partly it came from Sandy and his family, people who nurtured him, that he in turn nurtured with affirmation and encouragement. But largely, it came from God. His friendship was a gift of God. We hardly ever spoke theology, but you can see in his life the incredible influence of God and the gift of God's grace at work in his life, in his involvement in White Bear Lake Church, his involvement in things like prayer breakfast, and his involvement in countless organizations and activities that simply reflected that gift of God. Maybe you saw it most in the friendship he has with Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus is still the signature to his Christianity. And he reflected that. These things I remember as I pour out my soul. When you think of Don and Don's extraordinary gift for being a friend, first it makes you humble to realize that there are people like that in the world. In a time of division, to see a person of such great friendship. Then it makes you grateful for having had a friend like that in your life. And finally, it motivates you to become that kind of friend to others. If I may be so bold, tend to friendships. If in doubt, be there. The world will be blessed by you and by God, who knew how to be a friend. Amen. Our first reading today is one of the most familiar, probably the most familiar selection from the Old Testament. I'm reading the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare before me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. A reading from the New Testament, from the 14th chapter of John's Gospel. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. I will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I'm going. I will not leave you orphan. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. I've said these things to you while I am still with you. But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all I have said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid.
From the first chapter of the letter of James, we hear these words. Be doers of the word, and not merely hearers, who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves, and on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. I think there are many words that could be used to describe Don Craighead, and I don't know which words come to mind first for you. Friendly, caring, smart, purposeful, determined, humble, supportive, positive, a relator, an entrepreneur, a leader, a giver, a mentor. But I think everyone would agree that he was a doer. He liked to get things done, and he liked to see other people get things done. And both in his doing and in his faith, Don echoed those words of the New Testament writer James. Be doers of the word, and not merely hearers. It seems to me that his doing focused on three areas: his family, his work, and his community. Family was first for him. He loved Sandy, and he loved all of his family, and he was proud of them. He took an interest in their careers and supported them in what they were doing. and he really loved spending time with them, especially extended time when they were able to be together at Deer Lake or on one of their trips. His work was also important to him, even though he often downplayed his own role in the success of it, in the successful company he built, starting out with his father. Using his business acumen and marketing ability, Don grew the company from plans laid out on a ping pong table to a network of offices across the Midwest. He cared about his employees and he was proud of their work, even as he took little credit himself for the things that went well. More recently, most of Don's doing was done in his community. And while he took community service very seriously, it also brought him a lot of pleasure and a lot of connections. Everybody seemed to know Don, and he made an easy connection with all kinds of people, staying in touch with them from the first time he met them. There's no telling how many notes Don sent in the mail to the people he met. I know I received a number of those. I first met Don more than 25 years ago through Rotary, long before I had the good fortune to become the pastor of the church that he was a part of. But in 2017, when it was announced that I would be the new pastor in White Bear Lake, Don was the first person to get in touch with me, to welcome me to his church and to say that he hoped I would be involved in Rotary in White Bear Lake. Rotary was the first service organization that he became involved in. And involved is probably not strong enough word for what he did. He believed in and devoted himself completely to the ideals of Rotary. Service above self. Starting Rotaract for young adults and the Rotary E-Club. His involvement reads like a list of community organizations and institutions. And all of them were vehicles by which he could give back to his community. Don was a doer, and it is what we do that ultimately matters. It's our actions that manifest constantly, clearly, and faithfully what is on the inside of us. The biblical writer James elaborates on his call to be doers and not merely hearers by saying, "Those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers alone, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing." And Don was certainly blessed in his doing, and many others were blessed as well. For doers, faith is not a thing to be lived out passively, or by expecting something to happen magically or supernaturally. Instead, it is the way of active living out our beliefs and values that come from a life lived in communion with God. Trusting in God's goodness and believing that all of life is a gift of God. That doing is what shines light into this world and exerts a real influence over it and makes lasting change in it. Right now in the Christian calendar, we're just about to enter into the season after Christmas, known as Epiphany, a word that means manifesting or showing forth. That refers to the showing forth of Jesus to the world after his birth as a reflection of the love and presence of God. Don was, in his own way, an epiphany, an expression to the world of God's love. It's what we're all called to be, to live into a showing forth of divine love into this world, directly from our lives by our words, by our relationships, our legacy to those who come after us, and yes, by our deeds, our doing. We have a rich opportunity at times like this, not just to remember the past, but to grab hold of the great joys of life and give thanks to God for the goodness of life. Life is hard, and it brings with it hurts and struggles. To dare loving another person is to risk the pain of losing them and of having to rediscover life without them again. That can bring with it loneliness and frustration and deep questioning about the things that we hold certain. And it hurts. All of that is true about life. But there is also so much that is good. So many ways that love is shared and blessings of life are enjoyed. And we celebrate those things today as well as we remember Don. In a few minutes, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from Don's family about some of both of those things, the memories of the past and the things for which they and we are all profoundly grateful, and the ways knowing Don has influenced our lives and spurred us on to living life to the fullest as he did. The loss of a loved one is made even more difficult by our current circumstances. When we're not able to come together for our traditional rites of grieving, not able to have large gatherings of loved ones and friends, not able to share embraces and handshakes. It will be all the more important to reach out to Sandy and the Craighead family in the days ahead. Grieving is difficult enough even in normal times, but doing it now calls for an extra measure of creativity and caring. So today we remember and we're grateful for Don and for the lasting influence of his being not just a hearer, but a doer of the word. We're grateful for the legacy that he leaves behind for his family and his community. We're grateful that God consoles and comforts us in our sadness. We're grateful that God celebrates with us in our love for each other and has promised that that love never ends. Thanks be to God. Now I'd like to invite the family members who wish to share to come up one at a time and speak to us.
6 years ago, when Dad turned 80, I didn't really know what to get him for his birthday. So I made him a book with 80 memories from when I was a little girl. So Greg, when you talk about remembering, I thought, yeah, there's a lot that I remember. I'd like to share some of those with you, and from that part of my life. My dad raised my brother Jim and me as a single parent. I still look back and think, how did he manage to raise 2 kids and start a successful business? Amazing. So these are some of my memories. Dad's favorite go-to meals: fried Spam and canned peas, eggs scrambled with hamburger, ground ham and pickle sandwiches, a bowl of cubed white bread with milk and sugar on it. Keep in mind, he was 20-something, so he probably had never cooked for himself ever, let alone 2 kids. In those days, there were very few places to go out to eat, not like today where you could, around every corner is a restaurant or fast food joint. So in those days, we went to Quality Tea Room on Snelling. They had the best dinner rolls. Lee's Village Inn in Highland Village, they had the best popovers. And Gim's Chinese restaurant in Highland Park, where Dad could get his chow mein fix. But we didn't like chow mein, so we'd have what I call Chinese hamburgers on white bread. And for fun, sliding at the Highland Park Water Tower, Coble Park. Dad always got free tickets for the rides there because his business sold some kind of part in the O'Neill family amusements. And so we had our little O'Neill amusements, orange tickets for Como Park that we could go on ride after ride after ride. Dad would make kites, and he'd make kites out of the Sunday morning funnies, and he was a really good kite maker. When he was 13, he won first place in a homemade kite flying contest. So you can imagine Dad with a slide ruler measuring out the funnies into the perfect kite. And they would fly like nobody else's kite. Trips to Machinery Hill at the Minnesota State Fair. Dad was pretty frugal on the midway there. We couldn't go on too many rides because they cost a lot of money, and we didn't have free tickets for the midway. Drive-in movies in our jammies with a big brown grocery bag full of popcorn. Trips to Weber's Bakery on Randolph for applesauce donuts. Bismarck's white butter crust bread sliced. And of course, we'd go on sales calls with him on Saturdays and hang out in his office on Lake Street. One memory stands out though. When Dad came to grade school for conferences, he was the youngest and best looking dad of all. And years later, girls from grade school would tell me how cute he was. I still get little, like, my friend from California sent a little, it was a Facebook post. I remember how cute your dad was. During those early years, specifically 1961, Dad founded Craighead and Associates with his mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa Craighead. They founded it on the picnic table, which still sits in its retired location in the basement at North Oaks. Farmation was founded in 1964. Life changed significantly for Dad in 1966 when he married his wife of 54 years, Sandy. And I don't think he ever had to cook another meal again, which is lucky for Dan and Wendy. I'm going to skip forward 50 years or so to 2020, the end of April, early May, after the stay-at-home order for COVID-19. I call it the time when Dad was grounded. Sandy and Dad came up with a plan, though. They thought, I think it was maybe more Sandy's plan, I'm not sure. Since Dad was in lockdown, it might be a good time to go through the piles of stuff in his home office, which had grown and multiplied over the years and expanded into the laundry room. And, well, he couldn't work in his office anymore, so he was starting to lay claim to the kitchen table. So Dad was agreeable to working with me every Wednesday from 10 a.m. until he'd say, I've had enough. We spent nearly every week going through the piles until his first hospitalization in September. Those piles were essentially the story of his life. I didn't make him rush. I let him tell me stories. I pried him with questions, and now I realize that time spent with him was one of the biggest blessings in my life. Sometimes he'd just drop piles of paperwork into paper bags and boxes and send them home for me to sort through, because he knew I would take each and every piece and look at it, and really look at it. Then I'd come back the next week and I'd be looking for an explanation. And what was this picture, Dad? What was this letter about? Oh, Dad, you got a kite flying award. Whatever else I came across, and he'd tell me news stories. Those precious days gave me a true sense of his accomplishments and all he gave to his family, friends, and community. I started to write them down, and I have a list of over 200 he was involved in. Now, I'm not gonna read all 200, but I am gonna read a few, because I think it's important. It just gives you a real sense of his involvement. International Special Olympics. These are in alphabetical order too, so you'll be able to tell where I'm at in the list. ARP, Association of High Technology Distributors, Bakken Museum, Business Economics Education Foundation, Boy Scouts, Camp St. Croix, Century College, Compatible Technologies, Cretin-Derham Hall, Dunwoody, Emma Norton, Engineers Without Borders, Feed My Starving Children, Gallery 96, Girl Scouts, Habitat for Humanity, Hennepin Technical School, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, James J. Hill Library, Junior Achievement, Lakeshore Players, Litter Love, Matamidi Fab Lab, Manufacturers Alliance, Metropolitan State University, Minneapolis Photo Center, Minnesota Business Ventures, Minnesota First Lego League, Minnesota High Tech Council, Minnesota Institute for Talented Youth, Minnesota Pearl Breakfast, Minnesota State Fair Foundation, Minskew, Monroe, Minnesota Youth Athletic Services, National Eagle Center, North Oaks Network, Northwoods Boxer Club, National Youth Leadership Council, Positive Coaching Alliance, Power Transmission Distributors Association, Robotics Alley, Rotary, SCORE, Shoreview Community Foundation, Society of International Business Fellows, St. Paul Chamber of Commerce, St. Paul Festival and Heritage Foundation, St. Paul Foundation, St. Paul Prayer Breakfast, St. Paul Saints, STEAM, STEM, Students Today, Leaders Forever, Tech Prep, Union Gospel Mission, University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas, West Wind Organization, White Bear Center for the Arts, White Bear Lake United Methodist Church, Winter Carnival Foundation, Wolf Center, The Works, Youth Frontiers. Overwhelming? Yes. Remember, that's just a few. I was so overwhelmed that I called him one morning and I said, Dad, I just want to thank you for being who you are and all that you've given to others in your lifetime. And then I got choked up and teary. My dad was quiet for a while. And then he said what I've heard say before. When he got excited by an idea or a person or a cause. You know, life is amazing. And then he would begin to tell me another story about the last person he met who should know about someone because it was something that they would have in common. I think that Dad saw the world as an unfinished puzzle with infinite number of pieces, pieces being people and causes. Maybe all the business cards he carried were just puzzle pieces. And if he could connect them all, the world would be a better place. I have no doubt he will continue his good work from his new office, which has been designed with an infinite amount of space. Dad and I had a little phone call ritual. At the end of our call, I would say, love you, Dad. And he'd say, love you too. Then I'd quickly say, love you more, and hang up quick. He caught on after a while. And then he'd be the one to say, love you more, and hang up. Dad, I just want to say one more time, I love you more.
When you think of traditional father-son relationships, you might think of going hunting, fishing, golfing, or going to ball games. My relationship with Dad was not like that, but we found plenty of common ground, and in my opinion, we had a great relationship. Some of my earliest memories with Dad were playing catch anywhere and everywhere. For many years, the glove he used was made for a right-handed thrower, So it was made to put on your left hand, but he was left-handed, so he would put the glove on his wrong hand, and we would play catch that way. So he was always trying to catch like this. I never understood what the issue was. Did they not make gloves for left-handed people in the 1970s? And I remember him purposely throwing to my backhand over and over and over again until I could catch that way, like this. It was a lot easier to catch like this than it is like that. I guess I finally got tired of chasing the ones I dropped or totally missed. Eventually we bought him the appropriate glove, and I'm sure it was for either Father's Day or his birthday, I'm not sure. Dad also put me to work at an early age as well. On the occasion, kind of like Janine said, on the occasional Saturday he would take me into the office and hired me to put Powermation stickers on catalogs and sales sheets for their various vendors. Pay was 1 cent per sticker. I would put in a full day and make about $7 or $8, and I felt like Warren Buffett. I also remember him hiring me to do a job at a trade show at the old St. Paul Civic Center. And some of you may remember the Powermation bull riding booth that they had at one of those events. And in order to attract people to the booth, they put all these red horseshoes stuck onto the floor, much like you see now with all the stay 6 feet apart deal. So there were these red horseshoes all over the floor at the old St. Paul Civic Center. Well, guess who got to pick those up? Yeah, that'd be me. So I was on my hands and knees all day, and I remember, for some reason, I can remember I made enough money to buy Bob Seger's Night Moves cassette. So it had to be about 1981 or so, I'm guessing. But taught me to work hard. In my teens, some of the best memories were the winter vacations with our family. Dad worked really hard, but from what I remember, he always left to work at work. And we were on vacation, he gave his full attention to all of us. My favorite was when the 4 of us drove to Big Sky, Montana, and got to ski some real mountains, as opposed to skiing around here in Minnesota. Hawaii was a lot of fun too. And another good memory I have from that time was when I got a call asking me if I wanted to go to the World Series in Milwaukee. I couldn't believe it. So Game 3 of the 1982 World Series between the Brewers and the Cardinals was attended by myself, my dad, and one of his salesmen down in Milwaukee. Didn't like sports, but he went to the game anyways. And I got to fly all by myself at 13 years old to Milwaukee and back. I'm sure my mom probably walked me to the door, which would never happen now. But for a baseball fan like me, that was an experience of a lifetime. Summers during my high school years were spent working in the warehouse at Powermation. I was the SOB, the son of the boss. So of course we had to work, my sisters and myself had to work that much harder to get the respect of our coworkers. Dad treated me the same as anyone else, but expected me to work harder and not look like an entitled brat, as I like to say. That was a great lesson for me to learn at a young age. However, despite his attempts to get me to be interested in engineering, that was not my passion, and I decided to study business in college. It was about this time that my grandpa Craighead passed away, and Dad realized that none of his 4 children were probably going to take over the family business. And I'm certain deep down inside that was really disappointing for him, but he never said a word to me about that. After 29 years building Powermation, he sold the business in 1990. I have to say we were a little nervous because Dad was only 56 years old and had no hobbies. Per my opening statement, of course. But those concerns didn't last long as he found his true calling in life, which was networking, mentoring, and philanthropy, as he called it, the giving back phase of his life. At this time, I'd like to accept the credit, along with my 3 siblings, that we unleashed Don Craighead to the world. If any of us had indicated interest in running Powermation, how different things would have probably turned out. Nonprofits will tell you they are looking for one of the 3 T's from people: your time, your talent, or your treasure. Dad gave all 3 to countless organizations over the last 36 years of his life. He was beloved by so many, and we're hearing from a lot of them, as their mailbox can attest to. He was a connector and a mentor to people from all different walks of life, but he especially loved being around young people. The COVID pandemic took that away from him, and I know that was very hard. Zoom just didn't cut it for him. He was a press flusher. He wanted to be with people. As I entered my work career, Dad always befriended my bosses and coworkers, though his interest in sports was next to nothing. I was the only St. Paul State staff member who got a freshly grilled cheeseburger from the Midway Stadium parking lot every game he attended, and that was very much appreciated. Oftentimes, he never saw a pitch at those games, instead walking the concourse looking to meet new people, and of course talking to Mike Beck, the team owner. At my current job, he would come have lunch with myself and my boss, and we would go to the Hibachi Grill in Fridley, a little hole-in-the-wall Chinese buffet that he thought was the best. I hardly said a word at those lunches. Just listened to the wisdom of my elders. My boss loved Dad and named one of our meeting rooms in honor of him. Dad loved telling people I worked for MYAS, except he didn't use those letters. Sounded out loud and trying not to laugh. MYAS. Just remember that. Dad and I went to many networking breakfasts, lunches, and dinners together over the years. I don't think I ever got there once before he did, and I know I never left after he did. When I'd arrive, he'd always be holding court with a group of people, and the same thing would happen after the meeting was over. My respect for Dad only grew when I became a father myself. Juggling work and family life is no easy task, especially for someone with over 100 employees and multiple offices. I can honestly say I never felt business came before us kids. We named our firstborn Benjamin Donald in honor of him. I know Dad was tickled to death that his two youngest grandsons are both studying engineering in college. I wish Dad would have been able to visit Marquette. I'm sure he would have been impressed with their facilities and their faculty. Marquette lost out too, because he would have been their biggest cheerleader. We're all going to miss you, Dad. Thanks for being such a great human being and for all the opportunities you provided to us. I'm so happy we had the time at Deer Lake this summer and in the fall when I would come out to visit you and bring my bike along and take a ride. I'll cherish those memories the rest of my life, and we'll work very hard to make you proud as you look down on us. In closing, I'd like to say the best bit of advice my dad ever gave me was, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Well, Dad, you certainly practice what you preach, because everybody knows you. Love you.
Kind of tough being third in line because people have already stolen some of your material, but I'll let you know what I remember. So Dad knew there were many things in life that made it worth living. In Galatians 5, Paul wrote about the fruits of the Spirit. I believe Dad personified those fruits in so many things he did. Love. Dad loved his family. From all the family vacations, and there were a lot of them. Family get-togethers. This family celebrates everything. He loved being with his family. He loved homemade gifts from his family the most. He loved his grandkids and always took the time to introduce them to things he thought they would love. He also carved out time to show them he loved them. I remember he used to come up north and have lunch with our kids in elementary school. Madeline told me she would tell her friends that her grandma and grandpa were coming for lunch that day. And her friends would respond by asking, "The tan milk, Grandpa?" If you don't know what tan milk is, it's half white and half chocolate, and Dad loved it right up to the end. Of course, he turned me on to it, too. I don't think Mom and Dad ever missed a band concert either, except for extreme weather. And that's quite a drive up to Pequot Lakes.
almost 3 hours from their house. Joy. I realize when Paul talks about joy in the Bible, it isn't just about being happy and having fun, but being at peace in God, no matter your circumstances. But just a few of the fun things I remember about Dad are when he rented a Firebird for the day and took me zipping around town with a cool car. I remember when he was the West Wind in the Winter Carnival for a year, and how much I loved driving the convertible in the summer parades. I would always think, who is this guy? Because he would really whoop up playing that part, shooting his guns. His joy was also in the boxer dogs we had growing up. He loved taking them for walks, taking them to the lake, and giving them a vanilla cone as an occasional treat. And that joy in dogs also seeped over into love for our dogs, for my Labradors. Peace. The most obvious way I noticed Dad's peace is most recently with my cancer diagnosis, and how he seemed to have such a peace with it, almost like he knew something we didn't. He also seemed to have that same peace in his health issues. Maybe it didn't seem that way to you, Mom, but it did to everybody else. He never seemed to let either one rattle him, and he hardly ever complained about pain or discomfort. He knew God has a perfect plan for all of us. Patience. There were so many times he would wait patiently for us girls as we go shopping, or he'd come and stand in the sub-zero temps at Wild Mountain and watch my ski races. He also waited countless times for us as we go on rides when we went to trips to theme parks. The last trip we took in October 2019, I saw that patience firsthand, as he and I waited together as my daughter and her best friend went on the rides. Dad and I both sat in our scooters together and patiently waited and talked. Kindness. In his kindness, he taught me many things. Just a few of them: how to play cribbage. I think I was the first one in the family that he taught. How to ski when I was only 5. I remember skiing in between his legs at Lutsen. Or how to have a good work ethic at a young age. I also was putting on PowerMation stickers on work catalogs long before I ever had a real job. Goodness. Dad knew it was important to give back. He was so generous with his time and money, and it didn't go unnoticed. And not just with the rest of the world, but with his family as well. While we were growing up, he always made sure we had everything we needed and so much more. Faithfulness. My favorite memory of him was when I was growing up, and how every night he came to tuck me in, then sat on the edge of my bed so we could say prayers together. He was super involved with and supported his church, and he was also always faithful with Mom, and they talked on the phone every day when they were apart, even if they're on opposite sides of the globe. Gentleness. Most everyone knew that Dad could Most everyone that knew Dad could see his gentle spirit as he dealt with others. He definitely had his opinions on things, but he would convey them in such a way that he would draw others in rather than push them away. Finally, self-control. Dad had a conservative mindset when it came to investments, which served him well. He was never greedy for more. I also never heard him say a negative word about anyone, and that definitely takes tons of self-control. Dad stored up treasures in heaven rather than here on earth. What was most important to him in life was people, and he invested so much of his time in helping those less fortunate than him, whether it was helping them find a job, connecting people who had similar interests, or helping them financially. But most importantly, he invested in our family. I believe the true measure of a man isn't how much he has in his bank account, but how he lives his life and how many lives he helps. If that's the measure, then Dad was truly successful and one of the richest men I have ever known. And his thing for me was he called me his chickadee. And so my phone calls would be, "Hey, chickadee." So that was my favorite thing. Thank you.
past trying to find just one word that sums up who Grandpa was. I mean, he was such a larger-than-life figure to everybody, especially his young ones, but I was digging around, and I think the word I found that sums up who he was to me the most was he was a mentor. I mean, every time he sat down with him, he was always trying to pass on some little bit of knowledge that he gained through his life, be it how to raise a family or how to just be kinder and nicer people. And of course, the thing he was trying to pass on to me was how to get me and Ben to be engineers.
You did it.
He did. Yeah, and he had his ways about going about that. He would fuel our Lego addictions. He would take us to places like the Works Museum. Basically anything that would light that little spark, and it lit early. I mean, he did get us both to be engineers, and I think one of my favorite memories with him is him taking me to the senior design clinic at St. Thomas, and that's a big event that seniors have been working on a project their whole semester. They get a little job from some company. They go through the whole design process, and this is their one night of the year to actually present that to people. And Grandpa loved that. He was taking me around there and like showing me all these kinds of new technology and stuff. And any normal engineer, I mean, all they're going to focus on is like, oh, these cool technologies. Oh, that's a flare slingshot right there. But that wasn't really what he was focused on. His favorite part of that is he was walking around and he would see those young kids presenting these, and some people he had mentored, some of his best friends, and it was something that I saw, and it was so many people would be coming up to him, and anybody would see that many people, and that'd be intimidating, a little bit overwhelming. When people came up and talked to Grandpa, it was like he spent the whole time of day talking to every single one of them. He treated people with such kindness, and that struck me there. And I remember a few weeks later, the two of us were sitting down for a game of cribbage. And however many times I played Grandpa in cribbage, I don't think I ever got better at cribbage. I mean, what I got better at was he'd talk to me and I'd get better at life. And I remember this time he was talking to me about, oh, you're picking a mentor. These are where you need to look for a mentor. You need to find someone who has experience, who has the same values as you. And Grandpa's listening to what he thinks makes a good mentor. And I'm listening at, well, Grandpa, that sounds a whole lot like you. I really can't ask for a better mentor than you. And that kind of stops him in his tracks a little bit. And he stops, he says, oh, I'm glad you think of me that way. And it was like he didn't even have to try mentoring people. It was so ingrained in who he was. Like he was talking, you need to find somebody with the same values as you, the values you need. And Grandpa had the best values, and that's something I learned from. And I wish you could see me graduate, because everything he is, that's what I want to try to replicate. If I become anywhere near half the man he was, that'll be enough. Thank you.
I really get to go last, I think, so there's not that much left to say, but I have a few things to talk about. The first thing I wanted to mention is I brought a slide rule with me that he gave me at my grad party, so I tried to figure out how to use it last night. doesn't really. I'll stick to calculators. But at the time I got it, I thought that was kind of an appropriate gift going into my college experience of following in his footsteps and becoming an engineer, which has always been my goal. So, I also want to apologize for going tissue budget. I'm sure he's not. One of the fun stories we were talking about last night, Gene actually kind of mentioned it. One of the organizations he was involved with was Junior Achievement. And in 5th grade, my school always went to It's called J.A. Biztown. You got to pretend to work in a job, and you got a little paycheck, and you get to spend your money. And well, the whole facility gets locked down as soon as the students get there, because you don't want people entering with a bunch of like loose fifth graders walking around. Well, Grandpa, always wishing to be involved, walked in and set off an alarm, and I was a little embarrassed because that's my grandpa. Trying to get into all the children and see what was going on. He's been my role model my entire life. Knowing where he came from and where he got to, and how he did such an incredible job of getting there. It's just always amazing to me. And he really did push for me in activity engineering. Last thing I have to say is, we mentioned the mail. I don't know how it happened, but somehow we got his mail sometimes, And if we didn't get it, I couldn't tell you how many times he gave me magazines about engineering or even colleges when I was not even in middle school. At the time, I was like, okay. Didn't really know what to do with it because I couldn't understand most of what they were talking about. But it's just really nice to know that always cared, had such a passion for the engineering. It's something that I've always appreciated in my life.
Thank you to all of you who shared today. Let us pray. Oh, gracious God, nothing in life or death, nothing in the world as it is, nothing in the world as it shall be, nothing in all creation can separate us from your love. And as Jesus commended his Spirit into your hands at his last hour, into those same hands we now commend your servant Don, that death may be for him the gate to life and eternal communion with you. We praise you for the gift of his life and for everything in him that was good and kind and faithful. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand. to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us, and we are not alone. So let us go forward in the strength of God, who goes with us and before us, our confidence, our courage, and our hope, now and forever.
There's things I didn't know. You too, I'm more like pickles. What do you think, pickles?
Ham and pickle sandwiches, ground up ham and pickles.